Yes, Neve, we'll watch WandaVision later. I have 8 people viewing now, so guys, if any of you want to pop on any questions or anything like that you have about the work I've been doing, just pop it in the comment section. I'll see it there, and I'll answer live. I note that my niece has just deleted her comment asking me if I wanted to still watch WandaVision later. I do. If any of you fancy joining, that'll be fun too. So where are we? I suppose I will start off by talking about a couple of the pieces I've been working on, and then as questions come up, or as you have questions, you can just pop them in the comments, or if you don't want them to be public, you can directly message me them, and I'll pick them up that way. So one of the big pieces of work I've been working on since election has been the drug litter protocol. So back in August of last year, August of the year before. I'm writing off last year, as many of us are, because it doesn't count. I turned 33, not 34. That's how I'm working on it. But the drug litter protocol, essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to mainstream how Kildare County Council and other services, including the Gardaí, the South Western Regional Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, all of these different organisations will work together in how we deal with drug litter. Now, drug litter can be anything from a bottle to an empty syringe to a needle to any of these kind of things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop some educational material, but we're also trying to develop a protocol in which KCC staff or whomever is picking it up will be able to do it safely with the proper training and the proper information. I suppose many of you have seen that the Debenhams dispute is still going on, so that's another piece. The gals and Guy, being Mark, from Debenhams did meet at the picket line again during the week, so they're still going strong and they're still pushing for what is rightfully theirs. Now it's a struggle for a lot of them. So if you see any of their pictures or posts or anything like that, I would really appreciate if you could give them some support, and don't hesitate to email your TDs locally asking them to support what the Debenhams workers are looking for. I suppose I do have a big massive board behind me. So another piece I have been working on are bylaws that I'm hoping to submit to Kildare County Council. Obviously now with bylaws they go for public consultation, they go for consultation with a lawyer, solicitor, all of these kind of things. But around, it must have been around this time last year, I submitted a motion to KCC on the banning of balloons and fire lanterns. Now that motion went to SPC. It was supposed to go to the Environmental Water SPC or the Climate Action SPC. I'm not sure which one. But it doesn't seem to be at either SPC. So myself and some friends with some legal background have been working on developing those bylaws ourselves to bring to Kildare County Council and to bring to the SPC so that they can look over them, they can work through them, and then hopefully we can be one of the first county councils in the Republic of Ireland to ban the mass releasing of balloons and fire lanterns. Now I know that's not going to be, it's not going to be popular with everybody, but the reality here is that mass releasing of balloons, or indeed small releasings of balloons and fire lanterns, are a massive safety hazard to both the wildlife and to the general vicinity. So for instance, if you look at the fact that when we have dry summer, we're constantly under fire watch, for instance, for the Curragh, and fire lantern landing on one of those gorse bushes out there could literally cause a massive fire, destroying a natural resource that we have, and that, as it is, we struggle to ensure that it's looked after correctly. As well as that, there was notices and stuff like that in the newspaper, not last year, the year before, of trampolines going on fire because of fire lanterns landing on them. The reality is that they're a safety hazard. I know they're pretty, I know that some people use them to remember others, and I do understand the emotional attachment that people have to some of these things. But the reality is that they are unsafe, and that we do need to regulate to prevent them from happening, and perhaps develop and implement an educational piece where we can talk to and teach people about the alternatives. So it could be planting a forest of remembrance. It could be working to do any number of things. Balloon releases, you can do duck races, you can do any number of things that will assist you in remembering people who've passed. And I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to develop alternatives themselves. So those bylaws are near completion. Those bylaws are near completion, and hopefully I'll be able to bring them to the Environment Department of KCC and the SPC to then perhaps bring them out to public consultation, and that's when you guys will be able to have your say in them as well. But it's just the way I work is I hate referring things onto committees and expecting those committees to do the work for me. I've always been the kind of person who believes in doing the work for myself and not leaving it to others. So when it was referred to the SPC, I continued to work on this, and I'll continue to work on it. And I suppose that brings me to another piece or another policy I've been working on, and that's CPTED. So that's CPTED, but that's crime prevention through environmental design. And crime prevention through environmental design essentially refers to how we build our towns and villages, how we incorporate lighting into our towns and villages, how we incorporate footpaths into our towns and villages, and how we allow for permeability from housing estate to housing estate, or from housing estate to main street, in order to allow for people to walk or cycle to and where they're going from without having to cross roads and leave their housing estates, all of these kind of things. So the shortest distance, the shortest space between two things as possible. But I suppose when you look at CPTED and you look at permeability, they're massively important together, because you can have situations where we decide that we want a laneway between two housing estates. Now, if we want to put that laneway between two housing estates, and we're putting it against two end walls, for instance, you've taken away passive surveillance, you've taken away the curtilage of a space, you've taken away the ownership of the space on a lot of people. Whereas if we built our housing estates, for instance, in a situation where that laneway between two housing estates, but what it was is houses facing your laneway on either side. So it's no longer a laneway, it becomes part of a communal space and part of a community space, and it has passive surveillance, meaning that antisocial behaviour is less likely to happen. So the reality is when we talk about CPTED, we're talking about planning for social behaviour. Because if we don't plan for social behaviour, by its very essence, we're planning for antisocial behaviour. We need to ensure that the spaces that we give people are usable. We need to ensure that they are open and just essentially available for everybody. I'm aware I keep saying the word essentially, and I've been warned that people are going to kill me if I keep saying it. So I'm going to try not to. Then I suppose we have, so that's the balloon and fire lantern releases. And then there's the casual trading bylaws that we're hoping to have out to public consultation at some point. There is legislation coming down from central government. So we have to be aware of that legislation when creating our casual trading bylaws. One of the areas I'm hoping to have incorporated into those bylaws is the market square here in Newbridge. I think one of the things you'll find unusual about the casual trading bylaws that currently exist is that they actually prohibit trading on our market square. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that makes absolute no sense to me. For anybody who doesn't know Newbridge, our market square is it's a wide open paved and tarmac space. It's right by our pedestrian street, which is Georgia Street, with a small kind of roadway right across it. And it makes no sense to me not to use an open space like that effectively. And again, that ties back into CPTED, because if we have spaces that aren't planned for social behaviour, like if it doesn't look like we can use it for a market, if it's not being used as a market, antisocial behavior or congregation of people of perceived antisocial behavior for that matter will start to happen, and that will reduce the likelihood of people wanting to use that space. So we need to use the spaces that we have effectively. Anybody in Kildare town may have seen it with the amazing work that's been done on the square there. So there's a massive piece of work there to be done, and we're like, I'm working on it, and other councillors are obviously working on it as well. I don't believe for a second that we work that working in isolation will benefit anybody. We have to work together, and if we don't work together, things won't get done. I suppose there's two grants as well coming up for people. So there's the housing for people with disabilities and older people grant that's coming up, for for adaptation of your house to suit it, so to assist people in aging in place or to make homes more accessible. And then we have the self-help grant. Now the self-help grant has been held off for a couple of months because the reality is we're in level 5. And in accordance with the self-help grant, you need to get quotes from tradesmen and stuff like this. So you need to have them coming out to your house, looking at your house, and the reality is that's not exactly possible at the minute. And the self-help grant can be used for the upgrade of windows and doors, all of these kind of things. And I know I've had a couple of queries and stuff like that about it. So I'm updating you on here, but I'll also be updating using posts throughout the week. Anastasia, you need to watch WandaVision. Sorry, not sorry. I've already watched WandaVision. I have tonight's episode to go, and then I'm good to go. Alex, I'm not sure what your oof is for, but oof, fair enough. I suppose it was probably in relation to the balloon and fire lantern, correct me if I'm wrong. Mark, any update on the parklets? So we don't have an update on the parklets. Now, for those of you who don't know what parklets are small built structures, are not always built structures for that matter. A lot of towns and villages in the city and county council seem to be moving towards built structures that have to be installed in places, but parklets are essentially supposed to be, again, I said the word there, sorry. So they're supposed to be spaces that we use within our towns and villages that we would take up, let's say, for instance, a parking space outside of a shop, or not even outside of a shop, just somewhere in our town, so that we can use the public space that we have more effectively. So if you look at one, or let's say, for instance, 2 parking spaces, if you've got 2 5-seater cars, you've got 10 people in there. Whereas 2 parking spaces could actually provide seating for up to 15, 16 people if you do it right. It can also encourage and allow us to bring more greenery into our spaces. We can have like small flower boxes or planters incorporated into our towns and villages, right in the heart of our towns and villages, where people, like in Newbridge, you have to walk from one end of the town to the other to get to our green space, or you have to walk from one end of the town to the other to get to the Cora. Whereas having a bench to actually just sit and have a coffee on, for instance. Now I know with the levels that we're at, we don't want to be encouraging that behaviour outside of somebody's family or social bubble. We don't want to be encouraging that kind of behaviour outside somebody's family or social bubble. But the reality is that going forward, we need to start focusing on these things. We need to start making our towns and villages accessible for all. I have been kind of pushing for parklets since, I'd say, about maybe 2 months after I got in, because I saw them as a way of taking street clutter off of our footpaths, which is dangerous and obstructive for people with disabilities. So the likes of sandwich boards and stuff like that are creating obstructions for people with visual impairments or people in wheelchairs. And the reality is that our towns and villages and our main streets are a shared space, and we need to treat it as a shared space. Yes, we need to support our businesses and being able to get their advertisement out there, but we cannot do that at the detriment of somebody in a wheelchair or a mother with a buggy or any of these kind of things. So we need to focus on an access all areas approach when it comes to our towns and villages. Nolette Murphy, any update on getting a pedestrian crossing near the Gables on the Garvin Road for access to Liffey Linear Park? This is actually something that is really close to my heart. It's something that I've been giving out about since the very beginning. So I brought this motion up a number of months ago in relation to getting a pedestrian crossing, even something as simple as a Tooten crossing, to encourage people to use the actual official entrance into Liffey Linear Park, because the reality is, as it stands, we have people walking up into the wooded area, as I'm sure you know, Nolette, and coming down through, like, in between two bushes where there's no visibility for pedestrians, there's no visibility for cars, and like, I mean, my worry is that someday somebody's going to get hurt coming out of there if somebody hasn't already. So where we are with that is, when I raised this motion, Kildare County Council informed me that there is a housing development that is going down that way, which we were aware of. But part of the planning conditions for that housing development is a pedestrian crossing that will have to be somewhere along that road. Now, I'm still not happy with that, because the reality is that pedestrian crossing is going to be a lot further down. Now, as time goes by, if we develop Liffey Linear Park down further, that would be absolutely amazing if it was that far down that the beginning of our park was. But right now, that entrance of our park is where it begins, and right now that's where we should be having it. Now, it's something I've continued to fight for, and I've continued to liaise with the area engineer on, and they do understand where I'm coming from and the importance of it. Funding, as always, is an issue. Now, I have my own issues in whether I believe that Kildare County Council are applying for all of the funding that's available to them. As it is, we've seen a couple of funds there that Kildare County Council have gotten quite low amounts from, and I'm looking to get answers from KCC on what exactly they're applying for. Because the reality is, if they're being refused the funding, I understand. I'm not going to give out to KCC if they're being refused funding. I'll give out to central government if they're being refused funding. But if they're not applying for it, that's a whole other story. The reality is, myself and other councillors, whether they be my SOCGEN colleagues or councillors from other parties or no parties, have been fighting for massive increases to funding for sustainable infrastructure and transport, for cycling infrastructure, stuff like that in the town. And either it's not being put forward and applied for, or we're not getting it. Either way, we need to find out what the response and what the reasoning is there, because Newbridge has developed exponentially since 2016, when the last census was done, and that's the census on which our funding streams are designed from. And then, so that's the funding stream from which from which they're designed from and allocated from. And we've grown exponentially since then, and we will grow exponentially before the next census, because, as I'm sure some of you are aware, we should have had a census in 2020. It wasn't exactly possible to be sending out forms and going knocking on people's doors in the middle of the pandemic, so I completely understand why they've pushed that off. But there's quite a number of other things that need to come down the line too. So to answer your question, Nolette, the only update I have is that they've told me a developer one is going down that way. I'm still continuing to work with KCC to try and investigate another way that we might be able to get it in, even if it is something as simple as a pedestrian or two crossing on that road. The footpaths are quite narrow. All of these things do need to be taken into account. And I've already asked KCC to increase the pedestrian timing on the traffic lights down by there, because there's a number of older members of our community that have raised it to me that they're not even halfway across the road before the green man is gone. Hi, Sean, how are you? Vaccine passports for public transport. No, I don't have any update on vaccine passports. I haven't been made aware of vaccine passports I haven't been made aware of vaccine passports as a requirement for public transport. And I don't see them coming down the line, but if it is a possibility, it's something that I will keep an eye on. Mark, why wouldn't they apply for funding if it's available? So the reality is that as a council, we're one of the most understaffed councils in the country. I think we have one per 100,000, one per 10,000 people or something like that. Whereas other councils, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it can be really difficult to apply for funding when you have staff, for instance. So let's say right now there's a big, massive piece of work being done down in Monasterevin on Drogheda Street in relation to the upgrades of the footpath, winging the street, creating a safe space for kids to go to school. So that's taken a lot of the resources that this municipal district area office has. Um, and it may not be possible. It may not be possible to. Sorry, it may not be possible to even if we did apply for the funding to complete the work at the time that's allowed. So, for instance, the COVID measures for the URDF funding and stuff like that that came down the line the last time, um, it had to be it had to be in like the applications had to be in by March and the works had to be completed by November. We do only have a limited amount of staff, and whereas other county councillors will kind of go through the roof in relation to this, what I think we need to be doing is lobbying central government to allocate more staff to KCC to allow us to actually do the work that we can do. And if we have those staff, we can apply for those grants. If we have those grants, we can do the work. Now, that's not to say that work isn't being done. Work is being done slowly, very, very slowly, and it's by no means enough or adequate for a town the size of Newbridge. But we do have to acknowledge the issues that are there. Hi, Kelly. Enjoyed work. Thanks for taking a quick look in on your break. Alex J got her first dose there on Wednesday. She's working at St. James's Hospital. Okay, well, that's good. So that means that the secondary line of health workers or people working in healthcare environments are receiving their COVID vaccination. So that's great to hear. Tell Jay, I said, I don't know, enjoy. Do you say enjoy after somebody's just gotten their first vaccine? So we're a half an hour in, and I've gotten down some of these things. I suppose a lot of you are aware that the community development plan is open for consultation. You should check out the Kildare County Council's consultation portal. On it, they have the issues paper and a lot of other resources. Now, for those of you who don't know what the county development plan is, the county development plan it's a 3-year process, and what it will do is it's essentially a plan for what we want as a county, what we want as a town. Now that goes from the density of housing all the way down to the provision of community resources, the provision of community centres, recreational play spaces, all of these different things, even down to vernacular style housing in rural areas. So for instance, somebody brought up to me recently that they feel as though they're never going to be able to get on the property ladder. Now, personally, I'm not a property ladder kind of person. I am quite happy to rent for the rest of my life. I just wish that we had the rental properties, that rent was affordable, and that we were supporting those in rental accommodation, that we were building enough social and affordable housing to take people out of the rental market that can't afford to be there, so that we can support them effectively, and to allow for people in the rental market who might be on a slightly higher pay scale or a slightly greater amount of money to be able to save and afford to buy their own home. Now, the Affordable Homes Bill, which I talked a little bit about last week, is judging affordability, I think, on 350,000. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I know I cannot afford a home for 350,000. I'm not sure of many couples that could afford a home for that much. So 350,000 is not exactly affordable as far as I'm concerned. And I think we've all seen the reports that have come down the line through newspapers, through different rapporteurs, all of this kind of stuff about how it's actually cheaper and more effective for councils to build their own. or to employ contractors to build their own, to build public housing on public land. And when I say public housing, I mean social and affordable housing. So I mean your standard council house, as people call them, or affordable housing. So something that is on a low enough price scale that people can actually still afford to buy. I'm after rambling there now, and these are all after catching me rambling, and that's great. But so that's where we are with the the affordable housing bill. It's not going to allow very many people to buy their own homes, and it just seems like it's going to drive housing prices and rent prices through the roof, which is going to worsen the already pretty bad housing crisis that we have. Another bill that's coming down the line from central government is the Land Development Agency bill. Now, it has some positives. It has positives in giving the Land Development Agency the ability to master plan for areas, which is great because they can have an overarching or an overall look at something. And one of the best ways to build sustainable communities is to look at the community as a whole. But some of the seriously negative pieces of it is, so one of the aspects of my job as a county councillor, as a local representative, as your local representative, is that we vote on the sale of public land. So public land cannot be sold without a vote of council. The Land Development Agency is essentially seeking, not the Land Development Agency, the Land Development Agency bill is essentially seeking to afford powers to the Land Development Agency whereby they can just take public land from us without a vote. Now, obviously, they have to produce all of these kind of plans and stuff like that for it, but they can take the public land from us and build it themselves. But what they can also do, they can get private developers to build on it, which will increase market prices and increase the cost of those houses. If this is public land, it should be 100% public housing. So it should be a mixture of social and affordable. I'm not saying let's stick all social housing in one area, because we all know the mistakes of the past have shown that higher densities of any kind of housing can create a situation where it causes negative impacts to a community. So mixed types of housing, whether that be co-op housing, approved housing body housing, social housing, affordable housing, or full market price, or even a cost rental model for some of the housing. It creates a space where you have a more kind of integrated community and a community that works together. So them being able to take the land from us and develop it how they please is worrying. I suppose there is something in the bill that states that it should be a certain percentage of social housing and affordable housing and private developer housing, but the hill I am willing to die on is that if it is public land, it should be public housing, not private housing, not private developer housing. Then I suppose the other aspect of that is not only can they then take that off of us, there's no stipulation in the Land Development Agency bill that if they cannot develop it, if they cannot build on it, that they have to give it back to us. There's no stipulation there. So we could have somewhere zoned, for instance, as recreation and amenity housing. They could look to take that land to develop it as recreation and amenity. They can no longer develop it as recreation and amenity, and they can flip it to somebody else. We then have a situation where that land is left sitting idle, as has been the case on multiple occasions across the country, where land is zoned for one thing, and as a result, the owners will just leave it sit there in the hopes that it will be rezoned so that they can then either flip it for development or flip it for something else. We've all seen land hoarding going on, and we all somewhat I don't 100% understand land hoarding, but we all somewhat understand it. Hi Maurice, how are you? I suppose, so that's the Land Development Agency bill, that's the affordable housing bill. I suppose another thing that's coming up in next week in the Dáil is that Deputy Jennifer Whitmore, Social Democrat spokesperson for children, families and equality and 50 million other things, is bringing forward a bill to the Dáil on extending the commission for the mother and baby homes by a year. Now, the reason why we're looking to try and have it extended by a year is because, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there has been an issue with the deletion of data, the deletion of stories. And what this would do is it would give survivors of mother and baby homes, and I'm loathed to call them homes, to be honest, the opportunity to bring it to the Data Protection Commissioner, bring it to the Gardaí, fight for what is rightfully theirs. I think I saw a report earlier on from Roger Gorman saying that they may have found some backup files, which seems extremely convenient. However, that goes to further highlight the need for the commission to be extended, because it ends in 9 days. And it is really not acceptable how we treat women and girls in this country. Hi, Paul. Yeah, thanks. No, it really isn't easy. And I suppose a lot of the time it's not easy for me to come onto these lives because I never know the questions I'm going to be asked. But the reality is, if I have an answer, I'll give an answer. If I don't have an answer, clearly I won't give an answer, but I'll try and find it for others. Chris, when will you get the vaccine? Because you're so active in the community, you should be protected. Well, I suppose, like, first of all, just let me point out that I've been trying to stick, I've been keeping to as many of the government guidelines and government regulations as possible. The reality is I don't think any one of us can say that we've all 100% stuck to guidelines. We've all fallen short at some point. And I myself have fallen short at some point. Like, I have had to visit people in their homes to assist them with forms because they have a literacy issue or a mobility issue and they cannot get out of the house or they cannot get to somewhere. But when I've been doing that, I have been ensuring that I've been masking up, gloving up, hand sanitizing up the wazoo, like to the point where I have dry and cracked hands. So just to assure people that I am trying to keep people safe and I'm trying to keep myself safe. I do believe that politicians are considered an essential service, and as a result, we are slightly higher on the priority list. Now, the reality is with the way the vaccines have been going, there's no, like, they keep giving us dedicated timelines, and then something happens, or we get more vaccines, so it becomes shorter, or goes out further. So I'm not sure, but if and when a vaccine does become available, I will allow them to hook it up to whatever vein they want to find, even though the vaccines are intramuscular, so they don't actually go into a vein. But I will happily take the vaccine when it becomes available, and I hope others will too. Now, I understand that if people have severe allergic reactions, they need to consult with their doctors, and that's important. I suppose a couple of things that have been brought up for me over the recent kind of couple of weeks have been in relation to supporting our workers and supporting employees of companies and stuff like that. So I was speaking to a post the other day so as I'm sure you're aware, those guys are run off their feet almost 24/7 at this point because so many people have switched over to online shopping. But I was speaking to a postman the other day, and a customer who was fully able-bodied and fully capable demanded that, it was quite a large package, but demanded that the person bring it inside their home. Now, what we have to bear in mind when we're ordering things is that there are other people who are delivering these. So whether that be just like a desk, I got a brand new desk here, but it was dumped in a box outside my office. I picked it up and carried it in. So whether it's a desk, whether it's furniture, whether it's shopping, any of these kind of things, we need to be aware that the people who are delivering these things to us are human beings too, with families, with friends, all of these kind of things. And the last thing we want to do is to be putting them at risk. So I would say to anybody who's doing any shopping online, if it's not essential, or if you can't set it up yourself, maybe consider not doing it. And again, I do understand the need to balance supporting local businesses with um, like continuing throughout this pandemic. But I would just ask people to be cognizant, or that if you are ordering something, so say for instance, like I mean, I ordered, so my niece ordered this lovely desk for me the other day. Now, the place she ordered this from would normally do a service where they put it together for me in the space, all of this kind of stuff. But when speaking to them, I asked them not to bother with that because I don't want to be bringing somebody into my environment and putting them at risk. But I also don't want them putting me at risk, because the reality is that could happen. These people are delivering stuff to 50 million other locations throughout the day. And I am interacting with other people, so we don't want to put each other at risk. And I think that's important to bear in mind. So when ordering stuff online, I think ring those companies and make sure that they're not, for instance, forcing their staff to go in and set something up or take away old furniture. Because I know that's a service some places offer. Like, I mean, if you order a new couch and you're expecting somebody to take the old couch away, that's not exactly fair. You've been sitting on that. It's been in your environment. Chances are you haven't been sanitizing it. Let's be clear. Like, we all give our couches a wipe down, but by no means do we sanitize them. So that's not fair, and that's not safe on those delivery drivers. So I think we need to be very aware of that, and we need to ensure that we're just being cognizant of other people. And if you don't need it, maybe don't order it right now. Maybe wait until the numbers come down to order it. Maybe if you've already ordered something, maybe give that company a ring and tell them that the staff can leave it in the porch, or that you're going to have the door open and they can leave it inside the door. Any of these kind of things, but just don't put them in danger. Don't put yourself in danger, and just be aware of other people, I suppose, is what I'd say. Any other reasons? I love that my brother just keeps popping in here to remind me about what I'm supposed to be talking about, whether I like it or not. So at the Kildare Newbridge Municipal District meeting on Wednesday, so every council meeting we get to raise 2 motions, 2 questions. I raised 2 motions and 2 questions. Now, I don't always raise 2 motions and 2 questions because it's not always necessary. So one of the motions I raised was for the inclusion of the roundabout down near Rosebery Hill in the SCOOT system. So that's the automated traffic management system and a CCTV system to ensure effective traffic management, but can be used for ancillary things as well as that. Unfortunately, the style and layout of the roundabout down there would mean that they will not do it. So what I've raised and what I've asked for is a meeting with the area engineer in the near future in relation to that whole space down there, because we have a situation. We've got a school. Right now we have Rosconnell, we've White Oaks, we've Rosebery Hill, we've the meadows and the paddocks slightly further down, and we have Station Walk coming down the line. And yet in no location anywhere on that road, except for at the crossroads down by the paddocks, obviously, is there a safe and effective pedestrian crossing for young people that may need to cross the road to go to Scullin Village, which is smack bang in the middle there. So we need to look at an effective traffic calming measure for that area. And that is something that I raised at the council on foot of that motion. And I'm hoping, again, when restrictions are lifted, that I'll have the chance to meet the area engineer to discuss the possibility of a traffic calming measure or a pedestrian crossing or a pelican crossing or something to support students getting safely to school, as well as just your bog standard residents getting to and from the shop, because that's a reality down that way too. The other motion I raised was in relation to tree pruning in Kildare town. There's a couple of trees at the back of the playground that are hanging over to some people's houses. There's a bit of antisocial behaviour going on there. Again, this ties back to implementing effective policy like CPTED. If you look at the principles of CPTED, that tree never would have been put there in the first place. So that policy that I'm working on, I've got a draft stage almost ready to go to our local planning and economic development special policy committee of the council. That policy, if implemented, will have a massive impact going forward on how we build our towns and villages. And it'll have some serious cost-saving measures, because it'll mean that we look at things before we do them. in turn before we have to take them out. Then my two questions. So my first question was in relation to how much paid parking we received last year. So many people won't be aware that paid parking in this district can only be spent on roads related projects in this district. That is something that was decided upon by the last council. And normally it would be, as many have called it, quite the cash cow. But what we've seen, obviously as a result of the pandemic, as a result of people not using our towns and villages, is a serious decrease in the use of paid parking, is a serious decrease in cars on our roads, which has kind of been a blessing as far as I'm concerned. And this year we've only pulled in just over 72,000 in paid parking, which means that we have very little to top up our roads budget this year. With very little to top up our roads budget this year, we need to find that funding elsewhere, and that's something that I'm hoping to work on with the area engineer, with the roads department, and with other groupings within the council. And then my second question, which I can't remember because it was an information gathering exercise. That's what questions are on the council. They're information gathering pieces. It's just to pull information in so that you can then possibly formulate it into a motion at a later stage. But I'll get back to you on what that second question was. Then I suppose I have two motions coming up at full council meeting on Monday. One being my adjourned motion from the January council meeting, and one being my motion for the February council meeting. So my adjourned motion is on me having the ability to return the travel and subsistence expenses that we've been receiving throughout the pandemic and will continue to receive, because while I do agree that county councillors are not necessarily paid enough for the work they do, considering I know as a full-time councillor I get 19,000 a year, including those expenses. So while we do not get paid enough, being paid for something we're not doing is not how we fix that. Now I could, I've been informed, just spend those expenses on something else within the community. Now the reality is I have been doing that, whether that is sponsoring local charity organizations or buying food for the homeless, or buying shopping for some families that have contacted me that are struggling, which is not something I do very often, but sometimes you have no other option when you're trying to support somebody. But I could have done that. The reality is I have been doing that, but it shouldn't be up to me to say how funding that comes from the taxpayer for one thing is spent on another. Now, I know we have a budgeting role as county councillors, but that money is specifically supposed to be for travel and subsistence for councillors. Again, it is not much. It amounts to maybe 50 quid a week, but 50 quid a week is a big deal to a lot of people. It's a big deal to me. I just don't believe that I should be receiving something for something that I'm not doing. And I know others may not like that, but I'm not asking others to return theirs. I'm asking that I have the opportunity to return mine in. And I know my Social Democrat colleagues agree, and they're willing to return theirs if there's a suitable method identified by the council. Then I suppose the other motion I have coming up now, this is a bit of a convoluted one, because as some people will be aware of CETA, some people won't be aware of CETA, some people will call it CETA, some people won't call it CETA. So CETA is the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, and let me start this by saying that I don't disagree with trade agreements or international trade agreements. International trade is a good thing if we can get it and if we can support it. What I don't agree with is elements of CETA like the ICS or the investor court system. The investor court system will essentially allow for companies to sue our government if we implement something that could possibly negatively impact on their profits. So say, for instance, just to bring it right down locally, if we're talking about the balloon and fire lantern release bylaws that I'm looking at bringing in, So this is how it would impact local councils, because the only legislation role that local councils have are bylaws. Those are bylaws that apply to our local area or local geographic spreads. So if we were to try to bring something like that in after CETA with the investor court system, a company that produces or maintains either of these products could then take a lawsuit out against Kildare County Council for perceived loss of profits. If we look, for instance, at the smoking ban that was brought in a number of years ago, and as a smoker myself, and as somebody who has worked in bars, I love the smoking ban. I don't think any of us love the smoking ban when we have to stand in the rain, but I love the smoking ban in that it creates a safe space and a safe working environment for people who are working behind bars. But say they tried to bring that in after CETA, you could have a situation where tobacco companies, which is happening in Uruguay at the moment, where tobacco companies could actually sue the whole country for trying to bring in legislation to protect public health. You could have a situation where an increase in sugar tax could result in a lawsuit. And then to bring it right down to the issue of environment, you could have a situation whereby if we try to implement something on an environmental level that would be better for us and create situations of climate mitigation and create situations to try and create a safer environment for our children, our towns and villages, like for instance a national smoky coal ban or a national a national smoky coal ban. If we were to try and implement something like that after CETA, now the reality is prior to CETA, government have already said a number of times that there's a possibility we could be sued for implementing this. But after CETA, we most definitely could be sued by coal corporations. We definitely could be sued by coal corporations for implementing a national smoky coal ban. And the reality is the smoky coal ban saves lives. It has quite clearly been documented that it saves lives. I think it was introduced in the 1990s in Dublin. It was introduced in 2007 here in Newbridge. We were designated as a low smoke zone at that point. And it has most definitely saved lives for people, and will save lives going forward if it's done nationally. Sean Burke, this is the most Minecraft Let's Play I've ever seen. I'll have you know, I play Minecraft after I'm done with the discussion. You're just jealous that you don't have a netherite pickaxe. And then Alex Griffin with a laughing emoji. See, this is what happens. This is what happens when the nerds come on my timeline, but I don't mind because I'm one of them. And then I suppose a couple of last things before I sign off. I have 10 minutes to go till 9 o'clock. Last week I'd done an hour-long live stream. This week well, let's just say it's not going to be an hour long. I'm going to try and get off slightly earlier. So we have a situation where, so the couple of grants that are coming down the line. So we have the shopfront grant that's coming down the line. Now that can be applied for every 3 years by a local business to upgrade or maintain their shopfront. You're looking at 50% cost of $5,000 for regular shopfront upgrades. You're looking at 75% for upgrades that involves an accessibility or an age-friendly measure. And then, so that's available to any business. So if you know of any businesses that you think could avail of the shopfront grant, get them to give me a shout. I'll make sure that there's a form popped out to them. I'll pop the form out to them myself. I don't mind if I can. And then I suppose, so a couple of, in relation to the food and clothing that I normally collect for the homeless or to support people, I am currently out of shampoo, conditioner, shower gel, deodorant. Roll-on would be preferable. And I suppose like the likes of non-perishable foods and stuff like that are always welcome. Now, I give some of it out myself, but I also liaise through the likes of the dining room, for instance. And when I can get to them, the eating place in Athy, I'll happily pass some of the food on down to them, or indeed Chalkdara in Kildare Town, or Newbridge Family Resource Centre. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring everybody together so that we're not necessarily all singing off the same hymn sheet, but that we can all work together to kind of expand what we do and do it in a more cohesive way. And then I suppose the last thing that I want to talk about is I am looking at setting up a Newbridge Mental Health Forum. So a Newbridge Mental Health Forum would involve any organisations or community groups in the town that work in relation to mental health with different members of the community. So be that the traveller primary care groups that work with travellers in the locale, Newbridge Family Resource Centre, Hope D, counselling service here in the middle of the town. You have Oris that works with people with addiction. So what I'm hoping to do is bring together all of these people to create a community mental health forum where they can all work together and we can better address the issues that pervade our towns and villages at the moment in relation to mental health and suicide and mental illness. So I'm hoping to do that in the near future. I will keep you updated on that as best I can, but that's going to be, I'm gonna push it to get it done as quickly as possible, but it's not a short road thing, it's more of a long road thing. So I suppose unless anybody has any other questions for me, I'm going to sign off. I have 7 minutes left to 9 o'clock. I'm not staying on till 9 o'clock. Mark convinced me to do it last week. I'm not going to do it again this week. Thanks to everybody who popped on to listen to me. Like I said, this is going to be a weekly thing. It's going to be every Friday. There is a link in the event. Can half residents apply for the self-help grant? I'm not sure, Mark. I'll find that out and I'll post about it. It's generally council tenants, and I don't like HAP residents don't count as council tenants, but there are grants available through the council for private landlords to do up spaces. So a HAP resident, it would be the private landlord applying for it. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming on. Mark, I will find out those answers for you. Anastasia, I'm glad it's been informative. If you've any questions or anything like that, please do let me know. Sean Burke, I am not going to play Minecraft tonight. I have WandaVision to watch. So that goes to you as well, Anna. Don't worry, I will be watching WandaVision. Nolette, I will get back to you on the crossing as soon as I can. Sean, I'll keep an eye on the vaccine passports for you as well. And Maurice, thank you so much for popping in and for being so caring. I will endeavour to keep you updated as best I can. If you have any questions in the meantime, as always, you can text me, WhatsApp me, Viber me. I'm pretty much available on everything. If you need to, you can send me a call me and I will call you back. Don't ever let credit stop you from getting in contact. Thanks so much, folks. Have a lovely evening and stay safe.